And good evening to you all, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to Room 592, where we unleash the truth. Viewers and listeners, tonight we have a double header for you. We have Mr. Siand Dhurjon here to talk about a little bit about the law. And at 8 p.m., we'll be joined by Mr. Freddie Kissoon as we get into the political discussion. However, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to remind you that the views expressed in Room 592 are not necessarily shared by the owner and publisher of this outfit, and so they are not liable in any way. We have a lawyer in the house, so I can speak very, very freely. But, ladies and gentlemen, just before I introduce Mr. Siand Dhurjon to you tonight, I just want to share a brief little perspective. You may not all agree with me here. You may not agree with me now. But ladies and gentlemen, we are people of many cultures, many races, political background, what have you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for 5 long months, I and others like me, we stood up for democracy, fearlessly and without favor. I and others like me, we called for democracy, rule of law, and justice. Those 5 months that I have been here, campaign has actually been longer time than the political party spent on the campaign trail. But we stood through it. And ladies and gentlemen, throughout it all, I have maintained right is right and wrong is wrong, regardless of who does it. And you see, ladies and gentlemen, over those 5 months of this so-called election season, I have insisted that it is the court and nowhere else that has to decide on the allegations of fraud into those elections. We cannot make an allegation and then make it as if that allegation is now factual. It is a court that must decide on such allegations. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about the incident last night regarding Christopher Jones. And neither I nor you, we are not a court. I cannot take on the mantle of a court. And ladies and gentlemen, I cannot pronounce on whether Chris Jones committed a crime or not. That is for a prosecutor to prove and a court to so rule, and for tonight our Attorney General to tell me whether I'm right and wrong or wrong. But ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to the right of a citizen, our citizens, we must speak out. Last night, I felt embarrassed to see what a political spectacle was being made of a Chris Jones issue. That the police could choose the night time to turn up and search for whatever they were searching for. That the police could go to the lengths to ignore certain documents. That the police could want to become a court is amazing to me as a citizen of this country. Our rights must be adhered and upheld by no other than the police. Let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen, in the 1970s, the goon squad used to turn up at our homes, and in the dead of night, they would tumble through our house, purportedly searching for so-called ammunition. As a child, I grew up in deep fear of the police because they would burst into a yard, burst through our doors, ransack our beds, have us crying as kids. And it happened over and over and over again. It was wrong then, and it is wrong now. 5 years ago, only 5 years ago, we saw SARA, the State Asset Recovery Agency, and other agencies politically used by APNU AFC to embarrass politicians who were ousted from office. It was wrong then. It is wrong now. Laws, rules, and procedures must be followed and upheld by the police. Ladies and gentlemen, the question we might need to ask ourselves, is Chris Jones booked on an aircraft to go somewhere that the search and seizure could not have been done during the day? Was the aim to embarrass the man? And if it was the aim to embarrass him, then you break all the rules you are supposed to uphold to achieve a purpose of embarrassment. Mind you, let me repeat, I'm not a court, and neither is the police a court of law. So we cannot pronounce on the substantive matter of whether or not the items he had belonged to him or to the state. That is for the court to determine. But alas, friends, a substantive matter has become a minor matter in the face of a public substantive abuse of power. Tonight, we want to discuss these things. Should they be happening? What rights do we have as citizens? How should search and seizure be conducted? And to this, I've invited and asked our young but very proactive attorney at law, Mrs. Siand Dhurjon, to join us in this segment of The Law and You, as we talk a little bit about search and seizure and what rights you have. Ladies and gentlemen, my personal view is that the police were really wrong to do what they did. And as a citizen of Guyana, I felt for a brother citizen of this country. No one should go through these things. But Siand, he will correct me whether I'm wrong. And ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome a young man to our room 592, Mr. Siand Dhurjon, as I said, attorney at law, very, very energetic, very proactive, and recently married. And let me congratulate you, Mr. Dhurjon, and your beautiful wife. At least there is beauty in the family. I had to say that, my goodness. I had to say that. No offense, man, but congratulations to you, my young friend.
Thanks so much. It certainly wasn't going to come from me.
Great. And welcome to our program once again. And ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you all once again. And let me also say an apology for the absence of Mr. Leonard Gildari. As you know, he has taken a week off so that he could fill his starving stomach. He has been crying out about all the pastries everybody else been cooking, and he wasn't having any. So he is taking five nights off this week to really go and fatten himself up. You'll see him back in action on Monday. So let's get on with our discussion. Siand, can you tell us, the legal side of things about search and seizure, sir? What rights do we have as citizenry? As a citizen of Guyana, Yog Mahadev lives at a particular address. Sir, can the police turn up here and just want to enter into my home to search and seize property? What rights do the police have? What rights do I have? Can you take us through it a little bit? Time is in your hands, sir.
When it comes to property, when it comes to privacy, the rights to yourself, the starting point is always the Constitution. We have what you call enshrined fundamental rights. In Article 143 of the Constitution, we have the fundamental right, which is the protection from arbitrary entry and search. And what it simply says is that no citizen's premises or person even shall be searched by anyone unless Parliament or the law provides for that specifically. Now, when we check our criminal laws, such as the Narcotics Act, the Firearms Act, and so on, they do have exceptions to that constitutional provision. But anytime someone goes onto your premises, the first thing the law would like you to have is a warrant. The police would have to go before a magistrate, sometimes a justice of the peace, as in the Firearms Act, and swear certain information to apply for a warrant. And when this is granted, then they have the right to go on. But there are always those little small circumstances, those little loopholes in the law that the police can go without a warrant. But anytime that is the case, there are many formalities, many procedures that have to be carried out. The long and short in the answer where Mr. Jones was concerned last night, of course not. The police did not have the power to act in the way they acted. The police would have required a warrant, or in the least, had they gone without a warrant, they would have had to have some kind of authorization from a very high-ranking member of the force. The law says either a commissioner of police, a deputy commissioner of police, and so forth. And this authorization would stand in the place of a warrant only if there is suspected stolen property on a premises. Now, the police would have to go to the gate and provide this written authorization from the commissioner. The authorization must state the time they are supposed to search, what they are searching for, that is the articles they are allowed to take. They must show the person, the occupant of the building, and first seek permission. If they don't get permission, then they can resort to other means. Of course, nothing of this sort was done. The other reason that this can't apply, the other reason why the police needed absolutely to have a warrant is because in the law, when we speak of stealing, we are really talking about a term of art, which is larceny. In Guyana,
We
Mr.
seem to have
Dhurjon,
lost
can you
you a
hear
little
us?
bit there.
case, when it was handed to him or given to him or delivered to him, larceny already is out the door. So the stealing provision where the police could have gotten a warrant, where the police could have gone without a warrant, does not apply. The factual matrix that the police allege that he wrongfully got the property through a grant cannot possibly apply. They have to look to other things such as embezzlement, obtaining by pretenses, conversion, all of these other things, which may or may not apply. I don't know what facts they have in the police file. I don't know what irregularities their documents would have unearthed. But certainly for sure, larceny cannot apply. I noticed Mr. Jones and his attorney said that the police had told him that it's alleged that he committed simple larceny. Wrong again. Simple larceny only applies to where the property is stolen, which is up to a value of $60,000. In this case, it's alleged that he stole around 4.9 million, or he somehow wrongfully got $4.9 million. So I think what happened last night was really a disappointment, something to all Guyanese, something all Guyanese should be afraid about, all Guyanese should condemn. Our constitution says that we are to forge a system of governance in Guyana that is based on democratic values and the rule of law. People throw about the term the rule of law loosely. One of the main things, if we are to have rule of law in the country, if we are to be a country ruled by laws and not by the fancies of men, there must be equality under the law. There must be the right to equal treatment under the law. So as much as I condemn the fact that a high-ranking government official used his power to obtain a grant or applied in his governmental capacity to apply for a grant from the government to carry on another business in his private capacity, as much as I despise that idea, I have to despise the idea that something like a few dozen police officers descended upon his house where his 3 children sleep in the middle of the night to go in and take property.
Correct. Thank you for that. And ladies and gentlemen, to our viewers and listeners out there, our sister Debbie and others, you know, we understand. I personally understand, and I have spoken against it. The police had turned up to the properties, to the domicile of Mr. Ali before he was president in the night, and it was wrong then. And, you know, the police had turned up to other people's places and it was wrong then. And if it was wrong then, it has to be wrong now. The law is the law, the rules are the rules, and it cannot be right because suddenly, you know, different circumstances prevail. And, you know, Mr. Dhurjon is very, very straight with what he's explaining to us here with regards to how the police ought to conduct themselves. Now, Siand, I don't know whether, I mean, we don't know all the details of this matter, but if the police decide to come to my property to search whatever, is there anything I can do to stop them from entering my property if they don't present a document?
Well, first you have to ask them, what are you here for? Why do you want to come into my place? Do you have a warrant? You understand? If they don't show you a warrant, if they want to become like a bully, you might be better off calling the nearest police station, asking if these men are indeed authorized to be here. You can try to contact the commander and all of these things, but then there is the legal route. You can contact an attorney who can also make his checks, his inquiries. A worst case scenario is you can try to get an injunction, but that relies on a lot of factors because time is of the essence. Darren Wade was very competent last night to get an injunction in the dead of night from the acting Chief Justice over the phone. That's not something a lot of lawyers, other lawyers can claim to have under their belt.
Correct.
So when the police...
So yeah, continue.
Yeah, so you have a right. You have a right to refuse entry to the police if they are unlawfully there. You understand? These are rights that you have. If the police take it too far, well, then I would legally advise that you go with the process, and later on we would have to sue it for whatever. Like Mr. Jones did, he went with the process, or else it could have probably gotten violent. You understand? And so now he intends to sue and try to vindicate himself.
Gotcha.
So we are really at the mercy, at the hand of the police court.
So, Siand, let me just say this, that we are going to get a surprise call. We didn't expect this, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to get a surprise drop in by another attorney at law that wants to come in and he wants to back up what we are saying here. And this is no other than Mr. Selwyn Peiters, who was just contacted me. He's all the way in Canada, Siand. So, you know, Selwyn is an esteemed colleague of yours in law, and of course a good friend of mine. Yes, and so we are going to welcome Siand here in a moment. So Selwyn, as soon as you're ready, you are welcome to join us at any moment at your pleasure. Meanwhile, Siand and I will continue the conversation. So Siand, now the issue of the guilt, how do I ask this so that we are clear? The issue, let us use Jones as the example. The issue as to whether Jones had misappropriated properties in his premises or on his hands or not, the police will make such a determination, or the police can make such an allegation. Which one?
Well, the police have to get their evidence and all of that. But look, the question is more than that. You see, misappropriation kind of implies some wrongdoing, taking in a wrong way. But the fact of this itself, we have a clear conflict of interest here laid out, where a high-ranking government official tries to obtain a grant from the very government. You understand? In every other country, or in many advanced countries, we have codes for ministers. In our Integrity Act, we have a code too, which says that public and private interests shall not conflict. But the long and short of that is that there was a certain definite amount of undue influence that would have occurred when none other than the director of sport is applying to the ministry for a grant. There is also the issue that he was obviously not lawfully entitled for a grant, because his contract of employment with the government would have been a full-time contract. So he was not permitted to do other employment. So how is he all of a sudden an entrepreneur or a barber trying to set up a barber shop? You understand? So by no stretch of the mind was he lawfully entitled to that grant. So the problem the police are going to have, however, is why did they go the method that they embarked upon? The fact that they committed an unlawful search and seizure exercise still does not nullify or delegitimize what they found. That is still evidence in a court of law. But they are still in a bit of a pickle. Yes, go on, Mr.
Right. So in terms of police, in terms of this population, hey, welcome, Mr. Selwyn Peiters. And I know as long as we get into a legal discussion, Mr. Peiters will be, I got to get onto this discussion. But, you know, Siand and I, we welcome you, sir. And please join the conversation right on. You're muted. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're discussing search and seizure, and we are being joined as a surprise guest by Mr. Selwyn Peiters from Canada. Over to you, Selwyn.
Hi, Yog. I think I'm hearing myself back, so I'm not sure whether there's whether I'm on or not. But I wanted to say this, right?
Mm-hmm. Go on.
I wanted to say that I've heard. Oh, you know what's happening? I have your program live. Yes. I was running your program on Facebook, so I think I'm hearing it back. Just give me a second.
Sure. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're discussing that search and seizure, and of course, Mr. Siand Dhurjon, attorney at law, would have expressed the views about what the law says with regards to how the police can come and enter your property with or without a warrant, with or without papers. And so Selwyn is joining us to give us to share his opinion as well on the Jones side of the matter. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, Yog Mahadev's position is if something is wrong, it is wrong. It doesn't matter who's in power. It doesn't matter who's in charge. Wrong is wrong. Over to you, Selwyn.
Yeah, Yog, this is what my thoughts are, because I watched all the videos that were streamed online. I think the issue, the police came firstly without a warrant, and then there was there were the lawyers and the crowd outside of Mr. Jones' house. I've done over 100 search warrants within the last 3 years or so, and sometimes the police and other law enforcement show up without a warrant. And the sort of advice that I give to the clients is that if the police show up without a warrant and they've entered your home, as in the case of Christopher Jones, there should be no resistance, regardless of whether you're right or wrong. Let the police do what they have to do, and you can challenge it later. The police had no regard yesterday for the order that Justice Brazenton Reynolds rendered that sort of restrict and prohibited them from entering the premises. In that case, there's no way that Christopher Jones or Darren Wade could have won that street battle with the police. And you had 3 children in the house. I'm not concerned about Christopher Jones because Christopher Jones is an adult and he can handle his business. I'm concerned about the 6-year-old girl and those 2 boys that were in the home. So I wish a few things had happened. Given that the kids were in the house, one, I wish Christopher Jones had removed those kids from the scene. Or if he didn't remove those kids from the scene, let the police quickly remove those items that they claim they came for, and that could have been litigated later. 18 barber chairs, 18 mirrors, none of that can compensate no money can compensate for the mental distress and the trauma that those kids are going to live with. The police were heavy-handed, no doubt about that. But the police the crowd that showed up outside of Christopher Jones' home also caused the police to adopt that posture because the police did not want to appear weak.
Right.
And the police did not want to appear as though they're not going to be able to execute their functions because as social media video went viral and a crowd 300 people showed up outside the home. The police moved with reinforcements.
Correct. And so what happened, Siand, feel free to jump into the conversation as well with Selwyn. To you both gentlemen, so what happened is that a police, what ought to have probably been a routine police matter has obviously spilled right over and is now a big political matter. And it's taking an entire tinge of victimization and witch hunt and all of that. Your comments, please.
You know, I don't
You know,
know.
this is the way the police
Go
has
ahead.
acted for a long time. Sorry, Selwyn,
No, you go
if I
ahead.
could. This is the way the Guyanese police have been acting for a very, very long time. Look, I have so many canoe matters where canoe would just go into the people's homes and search them and say, we don't need a warrant. But the law is clear that where no warrant is acquired, they have specific procedures they have to adopt. Those procedures are never adopted. They pretend like they don't exist. So even under the previous government, this was a very common procedure. Of course, having a few dozen police or and all these vandals, that's a little extra. That's definitely out of the norm. But this is the way the Guyanese police have always treated search and seizure.
Right. And Selwyn, just before your comment, so Raul Maycock has said that the substantive issue, of course, is whether Jones qualified for the grant and all of that. And Raul, Yoge's view here has been in asking the lawyers present here, has not been to pronounce on Jones's substantive matter. It's been to pronounce on whether the police has adopted the right procedure, and we as citizens, if this were to happen to you and I, what recourse we have. Of course, the lawyers are going to give their opinion on the Joneses matter too. But over to you, Selwyn, whether you want to comment on that substantive issue or not.
Well, let me say this in response to my colleague Siand's comments, and I met him in Georgia, and I have a lot of respect for him. But this is what I think went wrong yesterday as well. In Canada, for example, where we do warrants and where the police is involved in a situation, I don't know why the lawyers, James Bond and Darren Wade, didn't engage in some form of negotiations with the police. Why they didn't come to an understanding with the police? Like all that sort of nonsense, all that sort of calling out and everything that went on prejudiced Christopher Jones in a fundamental way. Like they ratcheted up the tempo. And obviously you cannot win a street battle with the police. I can't emphasize that enough. You cannot win a street battle with the police. And you saw how the police surrounded Darren Wade, and he was actually crying, thinking the police would have arrested him. All that sort of situation could have been avoided if there was a posture to engage with the police, negotiate with the police, work something out with the police.
Mm-hmm. But then you see,
it was a crass display of.
Yes, go on.
It was a crass display of advocacy, you know, and then there were a lot of racist comments being made that we really can't condone, we really can't support that kind of thing. And I fully agree with Selwyn. They ratcheted up the conflict, they escalated the levels.
Correct. Well, thank you for that. And I know we are being joined by Mr. Freddie Kishoon. Freddie, how are you, sir?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
All right. And Freddie, just give us 2 minutes more. We're actually discussing
No
search
problem,
and seizure.
sir. No problem. I'm on the line.
Yeah,
Just tell me. Just tell me.
you can comment. You can comment if you wish to, but we are discussing search and seizure,
no
and
problem,
especially
no
as
problem.
related.
I'll wait for the 2 minutes. No problem.
Okay. So Selwyn and Siand, it's been a pleasure to have you here. We're going to get a political discussion, perspectives on politics with Mr. Freddie Kishoon in a moment. But your closing thoughts, Selwyn, and then I'll go to Siand. And Selwyn, in case you didn't hear this piece, that young man in the room tonight, he recently got married. And so congratulations are in order. And I offered to him that, hey, you are the lawyer, Selwyn. I offered to him that we can have the wedding in room 592. I can do the priest bit, you can do the lawyer bit. And jokes aside, over to you, Selwyn.
Let me say this in 30 seconds. Look, I agree with Siand that the police excesses are not only like people are saying, well, this is how the police acting now that the PPP came into power. It's the same thing when the APNU AFC was in power. And we saw that at the Ashman's building with as the Deputy Superintendent Clifton Davids when he came in there on March 5th, right? And it's been throughout. So if standard operating procedures weren't followed, there's a disciplinary process for that. If the rule of law wasn't followed, the court will determine that. But I think as lawyers, we need to be sober when we're dealing with clients' interests. and their rights and jeopardies. And what happened to Christopher Jones would not have happened if he had gotten proper advice. I really have a problem with how the lawyers ratcheted things up yesterday. I watched it and I cannot stress that he was relying on their advice and they really put him in jeopardy.
They did a disservice to him.
Thank you for that, Selwyn. Siand, over to you for your closing thought on this segment of the law. And you, ladies and gentlemen, we have been looking at search and seizure in specific reference to what happened last night with Christopher Jones and what risk you might all have if the police decide to turn up to your property under those same premises. Over to you, Siand, for your closing comments.
We have to stop with the tit for tat politics. An eye for an eye will leave the whole world blind. Violence begets more violence. We need to stop it. And all this did last night was create fodder and ammunition for a lot of racist comments. A lot of the whole sentiment is being stirred again about all kinds of racism. We need to stop. We need to do better. And we need to hold our public officials accountable.
Correct. And just to top it all off, Siand, so you have iterated at the top of the program that the police, when they come to anybody's premises, they need to present with you, or you should ask them, as a citizen, you have the right to ask them what's their business and what authority they come to inspect. You want to take that over, Siand?
Yes, and another wise thing to do would be to film every single thing, record every single thing that the police do. Go into every room with them where they go, make sure nothing is stolen, make sure nothing is planted there. You understand? These are all very wise things to do.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Siand, and thank you so very much for being here, ladies and gentlemen. Please know that Mr. Dhurjon will be joining us next Friday again for another half-an-hour segment of the Law and You, and we'll be talking about another topical area of law next Friday. I've just sprung it on him. He didn't know this before, but certainly I know as a young man, he can take the pressure. Siand, on behalf of the viewers and listeners and Kite Your Management, thank you so very much for being here, sir. We appreciate your sage advice.
The pleasure is mine, yo. Have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And